it's been a great week for justice. The Justice Department was forced to withdraw its charges against General Flynn. They admitted there was no there. They admitted he was railroaded. Now, of course, they didn't say that in the pleading, but that's essentially the conclusion that one can draw when looking at the various documents that were filed by the government, not only in its motion, but in support of its motion to stop the prosecution of General Flynn. And again, no there. He was railroaded. Comey is a crook. Obama knew. There are no clean hands, and justice still needs to be done. That's the truth about what happened to General Flynn. And I'm pleased as punch for General Flynn. He's an American hero. He never did anything wrong. He never lied. And he was victimized as part of the seditious coup conspiracy against President Trump. It was orchestrated out of the Obama administration, specifically the Oval Office, and there's startling new information about Obama's involvement in this. And it just confirms everything that you've probably believed and that Judicial Watch has been saying for years about the illicit coup conspiracy against President Trump. General Flynn, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, he should get millions and tens of millions of dollars from the government for what they put him through. There's that famous quote by, I think it was Labor Secretary Donovan, who was a Labor Secretary under Ronald Reagan, who was, I even forget about what the specifics of the charges that they tried to railroad him with, but he was vindicated, and he came out of the courtroom or the courthouse and famously said, "Where do I go to get my reputation back?" And of course, the left is pretending to be outraged when in fact they should be embarrassed. Now, one of the big issues, I'm going to get into the details of the filing that was vindicates General Flynn in a minute, but I want you to understand something. The left and their allies in the media, in quite a juvenile fashion, and said, well, if Flynn wasn't guilty, then why did he plead guilty? Well, the evidence shows that he was coerced into pleading guilty. And he pled without knowing the full facts and circumstances of his prosecution, namely that the FBI had no A, basis to question him, and B, had concluded that he didn't lie. That conclusion was concocted months later under the corrupt Mueller investigation. So what does this all mean? It means that General Flynn should never have been prosecuted. It means that the Mueller operation was an ethical morass and was thoroughly corrupted. It means, because these documents the Justice Department and FBI have had from the get-go, they all knew. Now, who knew what and when? I don't know within the Justice Department. I don't know when Attorney General Barr, for instance, knew about these specific documents, or even Director Wray. I suspect Wray knew a lot longer, has known a lot longer about what was entailed here. But as an agency, these agencies knew that Flynn was an innocent man, but instead were willing to put him in jail. So you've got this rot institutionally within the Justice Department and the FBI exposed by this. And of course, it exposes for the corrupt operation we knew it to be, the Mueller operation, because that prosecution took place under Mueller. And if I were the president, I'd pardon everyone targeted by Mueller. I'd pardon every witness he questioned. Because as far as I'm concerned, if he loses, excuse me, if he loses Biden, and whoever the nominee is for the Democrats, and they come in, you can see from their comments today or this week, they're going to come in and try to re-prosecute these people. President Trump should pardon Flynn. He should pardon Manafort. He should pardon Stone. He should pardon witnesses they still are threatening, like his son. Maybe he should pardon himself. I don't know. I think he technically can do it, drive them crazy, but he should do it anyway. I mean, the left is willing to put those who get in their way politically in jail. I mean, we saw that with Flynn. We saw it with Trump. And they'll break all the rules to do whatever it is they want to do to obtain and retain power. We saw that with the impeachment. So if you want to know why I get upset, it's because I know this injustice was going on. I know this injustice is going on. How do I know that? Because the documents show it was going on. And that's why the Justice Department was forced to do this. And I'm going to praise General Barr for doing this. Other attorney generals may have not have done it. And frankly, if Jeff Sessions went into office and Rod Rosenstein was still running the operation, practically speaking, it probably wouldn't happen. Wouldn't have happened. But let's be clear: none of this would have happened. None of this would have happened, but for the diligence of Sidney Powell, General Flynn's new lawyers. Because Sidney Powell forced the government to cough up these records, and the records were just so devastating. In many ways, Attorney General Barr had no choice but to do the right thing here. So I commend General Flynn. I commend General Barr, but it wouldn't have happened but for this outside pressure from Sidney Powell, who deserves so much credit for doing this. Because when she first came in and wanted to pull back on Flynn's plea deal, a lot of people were skeptical that it would go anywhere. I didn't know if it was going to go anywhere because the government holds all the cards in prosecutions. But unlike most lawyers in town here in Washington, D.C., and of course, she's not really from Washington, D.C., she understood the depth and depravity of the corruption of the Justice Department and the FBI. She knew they were willing to say and do anything outside the law, even to get people like Flynn indicted, prosecuted, in jail. And so she pushed back, and she forced the disclosure of these records that we had already been pressuring for the release of and had been gathered, presumably in response to our FOIA requests. So they were all just set, ready to be released. And it shows you the importance of transparency to upholding the rule of law. And now I want to get back to the case against General Flynn, or the non-case against General Flynn that has been exposed by Attorney General Barr and his team. So they filed this brief the other day, and I'm going to read it in part. I can't read it all because it's just too long, and some of it is just legal cant that you don't necessarily need to know about. The United States of America hereby moves to dismiss with prejudice the criminal information filed against Michael T. Flynn pursuant to Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure 48A. The government has determined, pursuant to principles of federal prosecution, I almost said persecution, that would have been correct, and based on the extensive review and careful consideration of the circumstances, that continued prosecution of this case would not serve the interest of justice. Mr. Flynn entered a guilty plea, which he has since sought to withdraw, again, under Sidney Powell's advice, to a single count of making false statements in a January 24, 2017 interview with investigators of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. This crime, however, requires a statement to be not simply false, but, quote, materially false, unquote. Materially is in quotes, with respect to a matter under investigation. So what does that mean? It means that if they come in and question you, you have to lie about a crime they're investigating. And that, quote, another lie about a crime they're not investigating is not material here. So if they ask me or ask you a question if you tell a lie about an irrelevant issue that's not under investigation, they can't prosecute you about it. Not that Flynn lied at all, but the brief will further describe why he made no statements, and probably could not have made any statements to the FBI that were relevant to an investigation. Why? Because they had the transcripts. They knew what he said already to the ambassador. So they didn't need to question him about it, other than, as the notes suggest, to get him fired or prosecuted. And by prosecuted, I mean a perjury trap. Materiality is an essential element of the offense. It requires more than mere relevance or relatedness to the matter being investigated. It requires probative weight, whereby the statement is reasonably likely to influence the tribunal in making a determination required to be made. After a considered review of all the facts and circumstances of this case, including newly discovered and disclosed information appended to the defendant's supplemental pleadings, so these were documents that the FBI had coughed up finally to Sidney Powell that she informed the court about and the government here is referencing. The government has concluded that the interview of Mr. Flynn was untethered to and unjustified by the FBI's counterintelligence investigation into Mr. Flynn, a no longer justifiably predicated investigation that the FBI had, in the Bureau's own words, prepared to close because it had yielded, quote, an absence of any derogatory information, unquote, emphasis added to absence of any. The government is not persuaded that the January 24th, 2017 interview was conducted with a legitimate investigative basis, and therefore does not believe Mr. Flynn's statements were material even if untrue. Moreover, we do not believe the government can prove either the relevant false statements or their materiality had a reasonable doubt. A determination to prosecute represents a policy judgment that the fundamental interests of society require the application of federal criminal law to a particular set of circumstances. And that's a quote from the Justice Department's manual. In the government's assessment, mindful of the high burden to prove every element of an offense beyond a reasonable doubt, and that the government prosecutors have a duty to do justice, continued prosecution of the charged crime does not serve a substantial federal interest. The government respectfully moves to dismiss the criminal information with prejudice against Mr. Flynn. So that's that. It's over. Now the judge has to, in the end, ratify the request by the government to drop the prosecution, but obviously there's not going to be a prosecution if the government doesn't want to pursue a prosecution. The judge isn't going to do it on his own. To the degree the judge has any discretion to say no, it's, as General Barr has explained in an interview to CBS this week, it's to stop prosecutors from bringing a charge and then pulling it back and then resubmitting it with something different and just playing games. It doesn't give the court a discretion to keep a prosecution going that the government doesn't think has any merit, which it has concluded in these circumstances. So there was no reason to interview General Flynn. That's what the government has just said to us. They all lied to get in to see him. And when you look at what happened in the days around the interview of Flynn, you're just going to be flabbergasted. And I could read it at length here, but I'm just going to describe it, and you can go and verify. Hopefully, I got the story straight more or less. I've studied the documents pretty closely now. So as this document suggests, in early January of 2017, the FBI, after a really abusive spy operation against Flynn based on the nothing conspiracy theory that there was Russia collusion, it was a falsehood, it was a smear. They all knew it was a smear, yet they investigated him anyway, hoping to catch him in something. They couldn't. And as I said, there was no viable case against General Flynn. And the text messages show that Peter Strzok, at the direction of the 7th floor, intervened to keep the case open. And by the 7th floor, I mean the leadership of the FBI, Comey and McCabe. Now, at the time of the what was going on also around that time, the President of the United States on January 5th, 2017, the day after they kept this operation open, he is having an Oval Office meeting, and I've talked about this meeting repeatedly because it's kind of key to understanding Obama's involvement. He discussed Flynn and the transcripts they allegedly had with the ambassador in the Oval Office with his leadership team, including Sally Yates and James Comey. Biden was there, others were there as well. And Yates, and this is material and testimony from Yates. This is not Tom Fitton describing Obama's being implicated here. This is Yates throwing Obama under the bus. She was surprised that he knew, and Obama kept them after the lengthier meeting about the fraudulent dossier that they were going to ambush Trump with the next day. So that's just more corruption that Obama was involved in with Comey. Obama kept Yates and Comey behind in the Oval Office, and he raised again the Flynn issue. And he talked about, weirdly, well, does this change how we're going to treat Flynn in the White House? Meaning the incoming White House. He was the incoming National Security Advisor. And Yates thought that was an unusual comment. And she put finally 2 and 2 together and realized that he was talking about the Logan Act. Excuse me. The Logan Act is a law that is basically a nullity now because it has never been enforced. I don't think the Justice Department has sought to enforce it since the middle of the 1800s. Yet when General Flynn was doing his job and talking to a Russian ambassador in the interregnum between the Trump and Obama administrations, they concocted this theory that he's not allowed to talk to foreign ambassadors like every other incoming foreign policy team would be expected to do. So it was purely pretextual. But getting back to Yates and Obama was the one pushing the Logan Act theory. Obama was the one pushing Comey to treat the White House differently than he would any other White House. And sure enough, Comey followed Obama's orders, more or less. Because Yates later testifies that, look, we've got this information about Flynn talking to the Russian ambassador. They were pretending to be concerned about it. We still don't know what's in it. They don't go to give us the transcript. They thought they should tell the incoming administration and the White House about it. Yates did. And Comey resisted doing so. And in fact, he did it over the objections. He resisted it over the objections of pretty much everyone else in the community. Even Brennan and Clapper supposedly tried to push him to tell them about it. And Brennan and Clapper basically backed off when Comey said, oh, no, it's an active criminal investigation. Yates says he varied and changed his explanations as to why he needed to keep it secret, because he went from it's a counterintelligence investigation to a criminal investigation. And so, but Yates was insistent that this take place, this communication take place. So she finally said, after Trump came into office, you need to tell him. And she went to call him, and he called him back later in the day and said, well, it's too late. I've got the guys going over to interview him. And they hit the ceiling over at the Justice Department, according to Yates' own testimony. But isn't it interesting how it all ties back to Obama? So there was this ambush interview set up in motion by Barack Obama through his minion, James Comey. And Yates describes it all, and it's described in these documents here. So Obama, when it comes to the seditious conspiracy against Trump, actuated through the attack on Flynn, Obama's responsible. Obama, and I used to joke about this in the first year or two of the Trump administration. I used to say, well, I'm waiting for the Trump administration to come to power, because there were so many Obama holdovers resisting, and many of them still are, and running the show contrary to the wishes of the American people, and obviously what the elected president wanted to do. And here you literally had an example of it. You had Comey doing Obama's bidding in keeping the White House frozen out of the intelligence information they had about the National Security Advisor. And as Comey admitted, he bypassed the rules and secretly went to interview the National Security Advisor to the President of the United States without telling White House counsel lawyers or his Justice Department supervisors. Yeah, supervisors, because he works for them, not the other way around. By the way, the FBI is not, quote, an independent agency. It's an agency of the Justice Department. They report to the Justice Department, the director does in theory. And of course, all of them report to the President of the United States. So what I'm describing here is sedition. And I appreciate Sally Yates throwing Obama and Comey under the bus, but her hands aren't clean because she kept on pushing this Logan Act ridiculousness with the White House and finally made it impossible for Flynn to continue working there because they alleged that Flynn had lied to Vice President Pence and who knows who else about what he said to the ambassador. And I don't know what he said to Pence. My guess is he didn't lie. My guess is he told him what he remembered. And was his memory perfect? I doubt it. Now, Vice President Pence thinks that maybe it was all a big misunderstanding. Look, they were all gamed by Comey and Sally Yates. So Sally Yates, the co-conspirator, turning in another co-conspirator who did additional crimes. It doesn't mean that Sally Yates is a great person. Remember, she got fired for trying to countermand and refusing to defend the president's initial travel ban, which is completely constitutional. And she decided she didn't like it and she wouldn't defend it. And that's why she got fired. Because she was the holdover acting attorney general. What a nightmare in the beginning of the Trump administration. And that's where the coup began. Now, this report, and I encourage you to read it, we have a link to it on our website, is important. I encourage you to read it completely. It's an indictment of James Comey. It's an indictment of Barack Obama. It is, though, only a partial review of the information or a partial admission. It's not a full-blown confession by the Justice Department and the FBI. They don't talk, for instance, I read it, maybe I missed it. They don't talk, as best I can tell, about the missing 302, the initial document that looks like it was edited by Strzok and Page. What happened to it? The 302, of course, is the FBI, the bureaucratic name for the narrative report created by FBI agents to document interviews with witnesses and targets. They didn't do that for Flynn initially, and they didn't get around to it till months later. So they don't explain that. They also don't explain the prosecutorial misconduct that withheld this information from General Flynn and his legal team for years. Do you think Flynn would have pled guilty if he knew about all this skullduggery? Of course not. That's what he testified to. He said, I wouldn't have pled guilty if I'd known about this. So as I kept on, when I said earlier, just remember this when you hear the juvenile leftists, the dishonest leftists say, oh, Flynn pled guilty. Why would you plead guilty if you weren't guilty? He was coerced. They were going after his son, and they kept that secretly and I kept that secret improperly. And it was involuntary as a result. So he did not plead under the law properly. And secondly, it was not knowing. He didn't have all the information because the prosecutors and the FBI withheld it from him. What a miscarriage of justice. Look, I'm happy, believe it or not. I am so happy. This was one of the best days in terms of justice in at least the first three, this Trump administration. It's a great day. But I'm still angry. I just can't help it. I'm still ticked. I'm still ticked about what happened to him. So what next? Well, General Flynn, the judge has to, as I say, ratify or kind of officially dismiss the charges. I don't know what Judge Sullivan's going to do. Judge Sullivan hasn't been terribly friendly to General Flynn, and Judge Sullivan is probably going to, I hope he recognizes that he was fooled by the government, because they violated his orders. And if I were Judge Sullivan, I would institute criminal contempt proceedings against General Flynn's persecutors, everyone involved here. I bring the whole lot of them in, from the FBI director on down. What did they know and when about this conspiracy against General Flynn? It wasn't an investigation. It was a conspiracy. And when you look at this document about James Comey's utter contempt for the rule of law, procedure, contempt for the president, contempt for the Constitution, of course, Obama moving along, obviously endorsing that, ratifying that type of behavior in that Oval Office meeting. What a gangster Comey is. What a gangster. Even yesterday, after this is pushed out, after the Justice Department did the right thing, and of course, Barr is getting viciously attacked. I want Barr to do more and better. But on the other hand, when he does the right thing, we all have to support that. And in this case, he did the right thing. It may be way late. We can all complain about reasons all complain about why did it take so long? Why did they cover up the documents? I understand that. But he did the right thing, and he's going to be attacked viciously for doing it. And so it's important for the American people to stand behind justice warriors like Attorney General Barr when they do the right thing. Because if you expect him to, or expect the Justice Department institutionally to continue to do the right thing, you have to support them in these circumstances, or support Attorney General Barr more specifically. Because I really think, now that I've been nice for 30 seconds, I'm going to revert back to form. The Justice Department is a mess. The FBI is a mess. I want to know what Wray knew and when. I want to know what Rosenstein knew and when. They say they just found these documents in the last few weeks or months. What's going on there? As I described to you last week, many of the page-struck emails, some of which were disclosed for the first time to Sidney Powell's General Flynn's team, they were subject to FOIA by Judicial Watch. We haven't gotten them yet. The FBI is stonewalling them. This all could have been, if the FBI had followed FOIA law, this could have been, Flynn could have been free from this years ago. We asked for this material 2 years ago. Text messages, emails. And if we had gotten them when we asked for them, Flynn would have not suffered the way he suffered. This is why transparency is essential. It's essential. And they're still hiding documents. 8,000 records, 8,000 pages of page-struck records. And I don't know how many text messages, since they're still refusing to turn over any of them under FOIA. And of course, they deleted some of them too, right? Remember that under Mueller? Where's the justice for that? So as I say, General Flynn will get full vindication when Judge Sullivan shuts the case down officially. Is Judge Sullivan going to institute criminal contempt proceedings against those who violated his court orders and precipitated this obstruction and miscarriage of justice? I don't know. What is the Justice Department going to do? Are they going to pursue this further? I don't know. I'm skeptical that anything else will be done. General Flynn is probably going to have to sue to get full justice, at least additional justice. I'm not seeing evidence that senior level officials like Comey and others are going to face criminal consequences. There's just no evidence it's happening. I know you're upset about it. I'm upset about it, but I don't see the evidence is happening. If I thought there was evidence it was happening, and sometimes even evidence is happening doesn't tell you what's really happening, because look at Clinton. They went through all the motions, really forced by Judicial Watch, because we were pushing them on it to do an investigation of Clinton, but they didn't prosecute her in the end. So As I said, this document is not a full confession. There are thousands of documents that still need to be released about not only the targeting of Flynn, but the general jihad against President Trump, the coup attack against President Trump, led by the Obama gang and deep staters like Rod Rosenstein. And I say Rod Rosenstein again because there's been a new document that's been released. It's actually not a new document. We've known about it. It was an August 2017 memo uh, uh, detailing that what Mr. Mueller was supposed to be investigating. Now, we had sued for it, and they just simply refused to give it to us. It was highly redacted, and we couldn't get it because it was law enforcement sensitive or something like that. So, all just garbage reasons for hiding their corruption. And it is corruption because when you look at the memo that Rosenstein wrote after the fact to ratify what, in my view, Mueller was probably already doing, you could see that Mueller was being asked to investigate non-crimes. He was asked to investigate the theory that there was collusion between the Trump team and the Russians. Well, collusion isn't a crime. So what is that about? He was also asked to investigate the Logan Act theory against Flynn. Again, that's not a real crime, practically speaking. And it wasn't a crime, literally speaking, because Flynn didn't do anything inappropriate. He was advancing U.S. interests in communicating with the Russians, as his job and as incoming national security advisor would demand. You know, in many ways, there's nothing new under the sun with this crowd. I mean, the left hates losing. I was talking to someone the other day, senior foreign policy type, and this person reminded me. I remember. I've always go back to the Carter Reagan fight because Carter accused Reagan of Logan Act violations, practically speaking, with the Iranians. And they kind of doubled down on it when George W. Bush was running for office. But she highlighted that Johnson complained about Nixon in Vietnam. Those of you who are old enough to remember that, I kind of vaguely remember that. So this is nothing new for the left. They just accuse their opponents of crimes as a matter of course. Here they escalated. They escalated it into a coup, into outright sedition against the incoming president. And if Durham doesn't question Obama, it would be a miscarriage of justice given the new evidence we have of Obama's involvement. You know, we issued a statement yesterday. I'm just going to read it to you for the record because it's important. Judicial Watch welcomes the Justice Department's decision to exonerate General Flynn, an American hero who was victimized by the Obama administration and the deep state. The targeting of General Flynn was a key part of the Obama-Clinton deep state coup against President Trump. Judicial Watch commends the heroic work of General Flynn's legal team, led by Sidney Powell, as I said. They exposed the criminal conduct by FBI and DOJ officials behind Flynn's illicit prosecution. This corruption, as Judicial Watch has exposed from the get-go, is the tip of the iceberg. The required next step for justice is the prosecution of the coup cabal who tried to destroy General Flynn and overthrow our president. We need prosecution of the coup cabal. And I don't know who exactly would be prosecuted, but I do know who they need to be looking at. Obama, Biden, Clinton, DNC, their lawyers, Comey, McCabe, Strzok, Susan Rice, Biden, Brennan, Clapper. I'm probably forgetting people. Bruce Orr, Glenn Simpson. What did John Kerry know? I don't know. I know his State Department was shoveling classified information after Trump won to his buddies in the Senate and the House to try to smear him. I know they were working on the dossier. What is Durham going to do anything about all of this? I don't know. Well, I kind of do know. I don't think he is. My instinct is he's doing an administrative review that may lead to prosecutions of some individuals. Maybe Strzok gets prosecuted. That would be good. This is why I think the president needs to appoint a special counsel outside the Justice Department to do this work. Because institutionally, I don't think they're capable of doing it. And plus, it's May in an election year. We're running out of time. I don't, people say tick-tock, something's coming. I say tick-tock in a bad way. Time's a wasting. Time's a wasting. So Judicial Watch is going to continue to pursue justice. We have the FOIA requests. We have the lawsuits. We will have new lawsuits based on the new information that's coming up. I'm convinced that if Judicial Watch hadn't been pressing for accountability from the deep state on Mueller and the Justice Department and the FBI, because you have to remember, our criticisms of Mueller, when we were criticizing Mueller, when I was criticizing Mueller, when Judicial Watch is out there asking tough questions about what Mueller was up to, demanding accountability, calling it initially that Flynn was railroaded, we were alone. I don't mean literally, but practically speaking here in DC, we were alone. I could tell you we made everyone nervous when we said things like that. The Justice Department was nervous. They were upset with us because we were asking them too many questions. You kind of saw that with the Justice Department's relationship with Nunes and Jordan and Meadows. They were resisting information requests from them too. But we were right about Mueller. We pressed and pressed and pressed. And I'm convinced that if we hadn't done this work in public education, the president wouldn't be president. The president would not be president of the United States. They would have concocted something to remove him from office or set him up in a way that would have required his resignation, like they did with Flynn. I'm convinced that our pressure, our education, and our dozens of FOIA lawsuits to get information made it impossible for them to do what they wanted to do. And it led eventually, and President Trump is, rescued himself so many times. He deserves a medal for firing James Comey. What a corrupt public official James Comey was. He deserves a medal. Because as he's often pointed out, if he didn't fire Comey, we probably wouldn't know a lot about all of this because they would have just kept rolling along. And then thankfully, he brought in new leadership at the Justice Department because General Sessions had made these terrible decisions to recuse himself and just gave up defending the rule of law within his own agency. Because Attorney General Barr came in and he saw immediately what was going on and said, we're done. And Mueller had to leave. Because if Barr hadn't come in, and I convinced Mueller he'd probably still be special counsel, or we'd still have the operation going, or he'd have a successor, a perpetual special counsel for the president. It's a close run thing, our country, in terms of whether we keep a republic or not. And I'm proud to say that Judicial Watch helps us keep the republic. And I want to thank you for your support that allows us to do this great work. So more is coming. More is coming. And we got some great justice the other day, but we're not resting.